Right now.
Mm.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 7 o'clock, so I had to hit it. Yeah, I see. I saw your short that you had a whole bunch of snow come through, and
Yeah,
actually, it was just a light dusting for December. It didn't
yeah,
bury your house. So.
yeah. No, it could have buried the house, but now it's just it's about 3 inches, I guess, but not bad. But I'm not going to complain because the winter could be much worse than what it is right now.
Well, I keep checking up my hometown in North Dakota, and I think it's gotten up to a 9 this month.
What's your
Fairfield,
hometown? Oh,
Fairfield.
yeah.
Yep. So, hello everyone. Today we're getting together and talking to a few people that have actually had the reptile law imposed on them or fought the law before it got put into place, which is the story of my case. Just want to share some stories and hopefully give you a little bit of advice on what to do if the situation happens in your town or your county or your state. Um, what are you doing, darling?
We need to rename ourselves so it has both of us,
Oh,
but
do
I
it.
don't know how.
John, how do you change the name?
Edit name. There we go. See?
Oh.
I know I could do it.
3 little dots on the bottom.
So I guess I'll get this started by in 1998 or 99 when I was living in Montana. Somebody approached the legislature and decided that we needed to clean list all the animals in the state of Montana. And most people most states are not clean listed, but the ones that are that I know of for sure is Colorado and Oregon. And when they tried to do it in Montana, we actually had to hire what did you say that was, John? People that go and fight for you in
A
Congress?
lobbyist.
A lobbyist. And it was about $3,000 that all the pet stores in the state got together to pay for. And what happened is the clean listing is basically they write down the animals you can have. If they forget to put them on there, then they're illegal. So in the state of Oregon, when they put it in, they actually had quite a venomous following. And when they put the law into place, they forgot to put canaries. So you could have a king cobra in Oregon, but if you were a 75-year-old lady that had a canary, you were in violation of the law, subject to a fine of up to $1,000 and a year in jail. So it took us months to fight this. We finally got enough support behind us to where the guy that proposed the bill, he said he was actually talking to my boss. I worked at a pet store at the time, and he said that we thought that once it had been proposed, you could not just pull it down; that you had to actually go through the process. And in the conversation, the legislature said, "Man, I should just pull this bill off the table." And it would have made our lives a lot easier and a lot cheaper because more money had to be put in past the first $3,000. So what the lobbyist does is they go up there and they stand for you and they watch out for any of these laws so people can actually do that in their state. The only problem is that it's prohibitively expensive. But he did. We managed to get it rallied and get it beat down. So at the time, it was most things were legal in the state of Montana. At this time, there was Steve Osborne moved up there, and he did a bunch of Gila monsters. So he was starting the fight to make sure that Gila monsters would stay legal because at the time, no venomous was illegal. And now, after all that, we got all that beat down in '98. It looked like about 2006, 2007 they reintroduced the bill, and this time it didn't get beat down. So there's 15 animals that are banned by the state of Montana. The reticulated python, all of the crocodiles, boom slangs, and all of the cobras,
Several
horned
mammals.
frogs. Yeah, there's a lot of mammals here. Snakeheads, which snakeheads can actually live in Montana and North Dakota, so maybe they should be on the
Which is a
list.
type of fish.
Yes, it's a fish that comes out of Asia, and they get about
What
three
is
feet
that?
long. And
This isn't a fish channel. What are you talking about right now?
so somebody actually got a bill put through that made a lot of animals illegal. Which why would a reticulated python be illegal in Montana? If one gets out in the wild, it's dead. Even in the summertime, it gets cold enough at night to freeze them. It's
You
just a question of power.
it like my fight that I had. And if you want me to tell you about how that started, I'll tell you how that started. Okay. My wife and I, we have a very large collection. We used to go around to the schools and to nursing homes and do shows and stuff, to educate the people. And it was going good. And then the newspaper was like, wait a minute, these guys, I guess one of the newspapers, like their grandmother or something, was in a nursing home, and they were there and they seen it. And they asked if they could do an article on us. And I was like, fine. So they came over to the house, did an article, took a picture of all of our stuff. Well, then the mayor of the city here found out that we had all these animals. And he was like, these snakes are going to get out and come up my toilet. That's exactly what his argument was. They're going to come up my toilet. And I'm thinking to myself, no, these animals get out. They're not going to survive even in, like you said, in the summertime here, because it gets down in the 30s here during the summer. It'll never survive. 6 months. They tabled everything for 6 months except for these reptiles. Finally, the whole city was getting really upset because they had all this stuff they had to get done, and they weren't doing nothing but focusing on these reptiles. So when it come time, they started showing up at all these meetings. They started having meetings every week instead of once a month, and people started showing up and were like, stop worrying about this stuff. So election come along. They voted everybody out except for one person on the board. Well, it was that person that was on the board that was best friends with the mayor and really tried to get these banned. So 2 years go by. They weren't saying nothing. I figured it was all okay. The guy who did the newspaper article on us says, they're trying to pass something about pets again. So we happened to go down. My wife and I went down to the meeting, and they were going to try to limit you to 4 pets in your house. 4 pets. And I'm like, okay, can I get a list of the pets that you say you can only have 4 of? Well, I was thinking dogs or cats. No, but they had reptiles and stuff like that on there. So I was like, for 3 months, we fought these people. And then I finally realized I seen her post a picture of her aquarium on the local town thing, how proud she is of her aquarium. And I'm like, that's what we're going to do. And Becky's like, it ain't going to work. We went down to the meeting, and I'm like, if you put reptiles on here, you have to put them fish on there too. You can only have 4 fish in your aquarium. She's like, no way. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I took a picture of the racks. I had them all measured out, showed them how many animals I could fit in one rack system. And I said, they're not outside bothering nobody. They're in my house, just like your aquarium is in your house for your enjoyment. These are in my house for me. And, so it got to a point to where she was getting real nasty. And one of the other board members stood up and said, wait a minute. If you're, he's got a point. You can only have 4 fish in your aquarium. By the time the meeting was over, the lady had resigned, and that was it. It was done. And the mayor goes, we're never bringing this up again, because every time they do, it's months and months of fighting. But USARC had sent everybody on the board member, because I'd contacted USARC because they were going to ban them completely. And they had sent out this big brochure of how these animals would not survive here in the winter, and how they would not go up your toilet and stuff like that. It was a big thing. And how sometimes people have these animals for emotional reasons. Not that I had that, but that, they brought up a whole good argument. So USARC is very important. But one thing I've learned from this whole thing is never let people know what you truly have. Because if you let people know what you have, and they're either scared of it or something, it's nothing but trouble from that point on.
That's often very true.
We made a point of now not letting nobody know what we have. So, but it never passed here. But then the state did pass a law against, you can have reticulated pythons here, you can have Burmese pythons here, but the requirements to keep them is outrageous. Like, they want you to have, like, if you have a Burmese python, you have to have a cage that's like 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot cube just for one Burmese python. And it has to have all this stuff in it. And then the state's veterinary, the head of the veterinarian systems here has to come out and inspect it to make sure that that fits their requirements. You can have caimans and alligators, but again, to get the permit to have them, you have to meet requirements that are impossible to meet. So that's where they're at with those.
So they're setting it up to where you basically have to have a zoological enclosure,
pretty much. But like with the ball pythons and all, one thing USARC did tell me, when you go down there, don't even tell them that the snakes get 3 foot. Just tell them they're small animals. They're not, because if you tell them they get 3 foot, people think a 3 foot snake and they start like, oh my gosh, that's huge. Because even around here, even during the summertime, during the animals here, the reptiles that live here have a hard time surviving here, and that's no joke. You said it best last couple of weeks ago on your show. How even animals that live here naturally have a hard time surviving. There's no way these animals are surviving if they get out. But they did ban all venomous, and you have to have a zoological permit or an educational permit to own those. And again, that's almost impossible to get through the state guidelines now.
It's the same deal in New Mexico. They actually have a crocodile permit, and it was put in place in the 60s. So we were interested in pursuing crocodilians in the state of New Mexico, which we had a local pet store that I was part of that we sold alligators for a while. And the Fish and Game came in and said you cannot sell crocodilians, or they said I don't think at that time we actually had alligators. We had some caiman. So he said, you can't sell alligators. I said, well, these aren't alligators. They're caiman. And he just kept saying, you can't sell alligators. So we talked to Fish and Game. I've talked to several people that are part of the Fish and Game. And what they have told us is that even though that permit's in place, nobody that's in the private sector will ever have access to that because New Mexico doesn't want to become the next Texas.
So basically, it was just based on one person's opinion. There was one person in the Capitol in charge of signing off on permits, and they just said, nah, no, thank you. We will not permit you. They didn't have to have justification. They didn't have to have certain parameters. So it wasn't like, if you meet X, Y, and Z, you can keep this animal. It was just like, no, I don't want anyone to have alligators ever. And so that person had been in that position for years and years. And the person who took over for her, she basically said, this is the way the law reads. This is how we do it. And so it just then went perpetuated for, I mean, when's that person going to retire? In 25 years? They've only been in that position for, I don't know, maybe 2 years. We were waiting for that lady to die. And then she just brought someone else in and trained her up in her own, based on her opinions. And we're like, let's go to Texas now. And we did.
Yeah, even before that, there was a guy in place. The state herpetologist was Charlie Painter, and he was a very knowledgeable man about reptiles. The problem is that he spent about 80% of his time in Mexico studying reptiles instead of New Mexico.
And he was very anti-private sector keeping. He had friends in the zoos. He could have anything that he wanted. He had seen a few poor examples and basically thought that your average guy is not up to the task. And so basically no one should have them. And he did everything he could to try and restrict reptile keeping in the private sector, which is where this woman came in, and it was a big mess. But we actually have quite a few people on the chat. Definitely want to shout them out. I've been trying to, if it looks like I'm distracted, I'm actually have the keyboard in my lap and I'm reading the chat. And where'd my mouse go? I'm trying to.
It's over here.
Okay, we have 2 monitors, and that is okay. So Brienne is on. She is awesome. How old are you, Brienne? Like, pretty young, I think. I love when young people are coming into the hobby. Rocky Mountain Spider Freaks is on. Big shout out to her. She's going to be on our show. I told you that, right?
Yep.
So she's going to be on our show pretty time soon. Puppet Songs is on, and they are asking why reptiles are becoming illegal. So I talked about that a little bit in the chat, but I think we should address that. Let's see. TJ's Backwoods is on, and they're saying hi. Let's see. Robin Melton came on and said that, made a comment that they have to register where they live as a dagu owner, but not as a reptile or tarantula owner. So, I mean, I don't know, that a dagu's exotic, or it could be considered like a nuisance animal, maybe because it's a rodent. But I don't know that they even are a rodent. Do you know if dagu's a rodent?
Yes, they are. And
rodents.
Marshal Platts just popped up, and I think I
sweet.
accidentally ejected him.
Oh, come back on, Marshal, if you can.
Hey, can you message him, John? I don't have any personal contact with him. All right, thank you.
Um,
He's coming back.
Okay,
on.
good. And then Area 51 Morphs is on, just basically saying how ridiculous it is, all this regulation, which I totally agree. Yay!
All their
Hello, hello.
fault. It's all their fault, Marshall.
Yes,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
All their fault.
We accidentally ejected you
Apparently, I
from the
can't.
live.
Can you hear us?
Well, I can now.
You gonna be able to hear us well enough?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm
So
gonna try this one more time on the mic, though.
Go for it. Go
Okay.
for it.
So you were talking about why they're making reptiles illegal. Anybody want to chime in on this?
I think because they just don't understand them. That's just
Mhm.
my opinion. I think they're not a cuddly little furry. It's been people think pets are supposed to be little fuzzy, little furry, little creatures. Dogs, cats, things like that. They just don't understand it. That's Marshall. I don't know. His whole town had them illegal there for a while. He went and changed the whole thing.
Well, really quick, Marshall, tell us about you for at least a second, please.
Oh, well, I am Marshall Plots with Marshall Law Morphs. I breed primarily ball pythons. I do have a couple side things coming up in the next few years with some super dwarf retics and then a couple of hognose. So
Nice.
those ones though with the retic and the hognose, that's mainly just for myself. So but the majority of it is all the ball pythons. So
I feel I should have filmed this down in my reptile room and got all this stuff behind me. Everybody's
I know.
got all their stuff.
This is the only place I can have quiet.
This is my safe zone.
Oh man.
So
I was
How are you
rushing
doing?
like a madman to get here.
Uh-oh.
Did you like the cold weather, Marshall? That popped in out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we're in for the winter now. So
I think so too.
yeah,
I've been banned from touching.
There they are.
He's gonna take over the chat.
welcome back.
Thank you so much.
So Marshall, you're working with the lace gene. That's
Yeah.
your big gene, right?
That's the one I'm trying to focus on the most. And it's really slow for me right now because I am working it it's an incomplete dominant gene, but I'm focused mainly on working it like a recessive, so that I'm working to hit supers in all my combinations down the line. So lots of holdbacks, lots of I'm trying not to do pairings where I'm not either using two lace, male female lace, or at the very least I'm working with the super. So that's all of that kind of really slows me down in that. But I mean, it's fun. I love all of the hot new genes that are out there and everything, but I'm trying so hard and so desperately to stay focused. So it's like, there's so much out there that I'd love to get into, but I'm trying to have focus. So
That's smart.
I like that idea.
yeah.
When you focus on one thing and you work with that and then perfect it to what you like.
Well, and I think it's really important for, at least, especially with like the lace gene, for somebody to try to focus in on it, because I have gotten a lot of questions from other people and lots of pictures of animals from other people. And it's like, is this lace or is this lace? And it's in the heterozygous form, it's a super subtle. It can be a very high expression animal, or it can be very low expression. So I get a lot of these questions: is this lace, or is this lace, or is that lace? And I was like, well, first of all, if you're showing me a picture that's straight down on top of the animal, if I'm not getting a side view or seeing the belly on it, good luck. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. The lace gene has a nice little lacing pattern or popcorning along the bottom, and typically like a clear belly. Those are two things that are really good indicators. And a lot of people want me to tell them or give them an ID with this picture, coming straight down on top of the animal. I'm like, I don't know. So
All
it's
right.
a lot of fun though.
Well, so before we go on, I want to thank you for being that guy. I think every gene and definitely every species needs at least somebody who's super dedicated to work with that gene and learn about that gene and just, that look, find all those little intricacies like those,
Yeah.
the markers and, if there's
Yep.
any kind of tips
Yeah.
on
And I think
texting.
part of it is just the learning process involved with the gene, because one of the biggest surprises that I had this season, because mainly all of my clutches that I produce lace with, I used my super. So I knew without a doubt 100% that in 4 of my clutches lace was in there. And what I was finding, I was having one that was a really bright animal and one that was a darker animal. One had all the alien heads wiped clean of the keyholes, and one had a lot of keyholes in the alien heads. So I was having these super wide variations within a single lace animal. And I was like, wow, it was really interesting, because I thought I was able to go to somebody and say, all right, so if you have a lace, it's going to be a bright animal. Well, that's not always the case. I find out now this year. So it's
Wow.
fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's like kind of like putting little new pieces of the puzzle together to figure it out. So
Speaking of which, you are working with puzzle too, aren't you?
I am. I do have. I do
Good
actually.
segue.
I produced some lace het puzzles and some bamboo lace het puzzles. So held all that back, and hopefully I can get them grown up sooner the better. but
Well, that's awesome. It sounds like you have an awesome collection. But tonight we're here talking about we fought the law and the law won. So I've already told my story. I've already fought this law in '98 for a clean listing in Montana, and
yeah.
Andrew, of course, has fought it up in his area. So
Well, we need to talk about what's happened in New Mexico during our time there.
do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to let Marshall tell his
Yeah,
story?
we'll get to that later. I just
Okay.
don't want to forget.
Okay. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but
Okay.
we'll get there. So Marshall,
We'll figure it out together.
can you just say what part of the state you're in and what state you're in, and
Yeah.
talk about your travels?
I'm up here in the north along with Andrew in North Dakota, Minot, North Dakota. And to kind of paraphrase the whole situation for me, a very good friend of me who was kind of my mentor, and she was breeding ball pythons outside of my city, but she worked along with my wife at a pet store. And over the years, we got to be friends. And she was actually the one that got me first into breeding, because she was breeding herself. And she would actually send snakes home with me and my wife, the snakes that she was trying to hide from her husband. so she would send me home snakes, and I would keep them at my house. And I was doing that for some time. And then I actually was set up an incubator, and I was incubating a few clutches for her. And in the meantime, I started building up my own snakes here and there. And when I started in on that and finally decided that breeding snakes was something I was interested in, I dove deep into the ordinances around the town here, and turned out that in the city limits of Minot, all snakes were prohibited. When you looked up the ordinance as to what species were prohibited, it had a list, like pigs, chickens, backyard hens, and those sorts of things. And then it got to reptiles, and number one, snakes. Didn't break it down into any specific species or anything like that. It was just snakes. So it didn't matter if you had a corn snake or if you had a retic. It was not allowed. So just through that, I kind of started looking around and talking to some people and finding out if anybody had talked to the city council, anybody. And I did find out that some people in the past had tried starting up a petition, either online or submitted through the mail or whatever. And those petitions never went anywhere. So instead of going that route and looking at starting a petition, I just simply went to a city council meeting, because within any city council meeting, there's always going to be a moment that's open. They open up the floor and they let anyone speak. So I just went in and I went into a city council, and as soon as they opened up the floor for anyone to speak, I went up, and I just kind of introduced myself. And out of all the city council members sitting there in front of me, the very first thing that I opened up with, I said, first of all, I would like to know how many of you are aware that within the city limits, there are no snakes allowed within city limits. And there was just like 5 minutes of silence. Like everyone's looking at each other like, I don't know. Because there was always an ordinance that was never enforced unless a law enforcement officer was forced to enforce it.
Right.
Like if they were going into, say, a drug bust and there was a snake there, well, they'd have to find out what to do with it. And then they would find out, oh, it's not allowed. So then that person would get fined for it. Or if there was a domestic dispute or some reason for an officer to be in your house, it was never enforced. So they didn't even know it was an ordinance. They didn't even know why it was an ordinance. So from there, I got really positive feedback from most of the city council members. So what they had decided to do was, instead of having them focus on it, they set up this ad hoc committee, and they included myself, the chief of police, a couple other people from the community, and I think there was someone else, I can't remember, but one of the city council members. And what we would do is we would meet once or twice a month, and we would discuss animal ordinances within the city. And once we discussed each of these ordinances, then we would make recommendations on whether to leave them alone or to change them. And once we came up with our recommendations, then we presented those to the city council. From there, they got to vote on those recommendations. So all in all, it probably took about a year. So,
Wow.
and through our recommendations on snakes, they reversed the ordinance. They allowed snakes, but they did throw in some restrictions. Yeah, because I guess my whole focus was I wanted to get my foot in the door and have something changed. So I figured I would give a little and take a little. So I said, why don't we, instead of banning all snakes, why don't we just leave it to the list that's on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's non-injurious, non-venomous, injurious animals. So, of course, that still includes retics, Burmese, python, rock pythons and things like that. But it's a start, and I got my foot in the door. So give a little, take a little. And like I said, most often people aren't even going to know you have a snake in your house anyways. So
So may I ask you two personal questions, and feel free to be like, oh, I don't want to answer that. So first of all, I'm curious, did you have to spend any money during this to help combat any of this? Or was this you speaking on a public forum and then like volunteering as a committee member?
Yeah, out of pocket costs, no. I didn't have to, other than printing out my own leaflets to present to city council members, present to the community if they came to our ad hoc committee. So honestly, just putting paperwork together, that was the only out of pocket cost. And the biggest thing though was Phil Goss at US Arc. I contacted him early in this, and he literally emailed me a template in what to say, what to do, what to present to the city council, because he's like, I've been through this thousands of times with thousands of different cities, state officials, and whatnot. He said, you can look through these presentations that I have, you can edit them to fit your situation. You can change any of that to include local names of yourself and things like
Mhm.
that. So he literally, for a few of the presentations, he had a complete template of what to say and what to do for me. So that
Wow.
was amazing to have that resource.
That's incredible. I mean, it's almost like free legal representation
Yeah.
almost. You
Yep.
know what I mean? That's amazing.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
my second question was, did you continue keeping reptiles throughout this?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, 2000 or March of 2018, the ordinance was, they had the second reading of the ordinance to be changed. And that's when it became ordinance, was March 18th, 2018. And I was I was putting like 2 clutches into the incubator March 20th, 25th. Yeah. So
Was there kind of an understanding, though, that that was sort of an esoteric law that wasn't necessarily enforced without good reason?
when I spoke to the animal control officers, in fact, one of them who didn't live in town, she actually would stop in my wife's pet store to pick up mice and stuff and rats for her own snakes. And in visiting with her, she told me point blank. She says, you don't even really have to worry too much about this ordinance unless, number one, you really piss somebody off and they
Right.
want to come after you, or
Mhm.
if you're running down the street, I got snakes.
Right.
You don't really have to worry about it. But it's just something that we needed to take care of
Mhm.
because, number one, it was right. It was the right thing to do, and it was just for that peace of mind for a lot of people, because it was so silly. You couldn't keep a snake in the city limits, but they could be sold out of a pet store in the
Right.
city limits. All you had to do was present the employees at a pet store an address that was not within the city limits, and here's your snake. So
Interesting.
We've seen
yeah.
that mentality here in Montana too. There was a county here where a friend of ours was trying to set up a zoo,
In
and so
Texas,
where did I say?
in Montana.
Oh yeah, I'm still thinking of Montana. Here in Texas, and Bastrop County is the name of the county.
Someone
So,
forgot his Diet Coke tonight. His blood sugar's a
Uh
little low,
oh.
guys.
so what he did is he went to the city council meeting and he presented his zoo, and the district attorney asked if he could sit in on the meeting. He said sure. So he went in, he presented, telling him because he was gonna do basically everything that was reptiles, venomous, non-venomous, crocodilians, anything that was beautiful and exotic. He wanted to have permission to have it.
Which he already was keeping privately and very well and within the bounds of the law, but he wanted to open a public place.
So he goes to the council meeting. Everybody's slapping each other on the back. Just looks like it's a done deal. The next day, police officers show up to his house and say, "I'm sorry, I got to write you tickets for all the animals that you have." The DA went and every pet
Hundreds
store in
of
town,
animals.
yeah, every pet store in
Yeah.
town, they wrote a ticket to them for anything that they considered outside of that law. There was some law he found from the 60s that banned him in that particular county. So he had to move out of the county.
Well, he chose to leave the county. But I mean, he was looking at fines, citations, and they were just slapping him. I mean, he bred iguanas. At one time, he had 200 to 300 iguana hatchlings. They were fining him for every animal, every type of. I mean, they were just
Mm.
piling infraction on top of infraction. And normally, if you're in trouble for something that's like a multiple offense, what they'll do is they'll give you like the maximum fine, and then for each one after, they'll tack on, I don't know, $5 more. They were doing the max, max, max to where, I mean, it was ridiculous. And really it seemed like he got good feedback. The everyone at the when he presented were saying it's going to be so lucrative. This is great. It'll be good for the community. But that it was just that DA that had a wild
Oh.
hair and didn't like it and just turned his world upside down.
That's why I don't tell anybody anything I got.
Mhm.
Marshall might know, because
Yeah.
he's a fellow reptile guy, but I don't tell anybody anything anymore after that whole ordeal I went through. I mean, they want to, can we come out and talk to you about it? Nope. I don't have nothing. That's what I tell them. No. Because it ends up being trouble when somebody hears something that you have and then they don't like it because it doesn't fit their criteria of what a pet should be, then you're in trouble.
Well, and it's unfortunate because there are a lot of very harmless, curious people who just want to see, they want to know, but then it's that one guy that just can't, I don't know, people that are too scared, or I don't know. Most of it is based in ignorance and fear. As we've said over and over.
So there's quite a few messages. Let me see if I can get through it. So let's see.
One of the things about that, though, like I didn't want to interrupt Marita, is you got to think with us being educators and a sort with our social media, with us doing what we have to do, you have to abide by the law. Like,
Right.
your animals are eventually going to pop up, or someone's going to say, "Hey, I saw this picture here," and it's going to get back. I've literally had Fish and Wildlife be like, "Hey, do you still have this animal? Because you're not supposed to have it in this county." I was like, "Well, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to have it, and no, I don't have it. You're welcome to come look." But everything, I've now taken the time, like, just for the animals that I keep, I have to keep 3 different licenses just to have the animals that I have. So I have to have a business license because the number of ball pythons that I have and the number of retics that I have to have a large snake license because of my retics. And then I have to have a business license, or it's like a commercial license, essentially, through Fish and Wildlife. And if I don't maintain those every year, then it's a fine and jail time per animal.
Wow.
And
scary business.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't post my location when I'm doing my posts anymore. It's just, I don't feel the need to, but it's not like they can't trace that back.
You will get recognized too, somewhere.
Years ago and see that I used to put it everywhere. You know what I mean?
Because I was in the pet store up there in Minot, and that's when Marshall come up to me. I seen you on YouTube. That's how we met each other.
Oh, that's funny.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if they want to get you, they will get you. So, Rocky Mountain Spider Freak said, in Canada, only zoos and educational programs can own large reptiles and venomous, which currently there are only 5 in all of Canada, I do believe. Almost impossible to get one of those permits, which is kind of interesting because I saw in a video by what's the name of that pair out of Canada? KB Reptiles. KB Reptiles.
KB,
yeah, Carrie Rose.
Yeah.
I think they went into a pet store where there was a Brachylophus fasciatus in the pet store, which is the Fiji Island crested iguana, which many people in the United States have gone to jail for smuggling in illegally. So I don't know. There must be some ways around that law in Canada. I don't know much about Canada.
Or not.
Zamora says, "What's up?" Acadia Territory said, "Just saw this now, joining in from Canada." G Network said, "Como." Rocky Mountain Spider Freaks said, Canada lost their crap. Now late reptiles at all are legal. Now no late reptiles. So somebody was talking about TJ's Backwoods Serpentarium says that reptiles tend to be less allergenic than other animals. Somebody had put a list here. So Robin Melton said Atractispidae, Dyspholidus, Elapidae, Hydrophilidae, water and croc monitors, and Biperidae. But I'm not sure what he was referring to, if that's illegal in a certain state or what.
Robin might be a woman. You don't know.
Oh, yes, she might be.
Tell us,
Nick
Robin.
Will says ban the bans. Let's see. Somebody says, I don't own any reptiles or spiders and don't want to, but those who do should be able to own them within reason. Then he said, I can see why Florida banned boa constrictors as they're being dumped illegally. And we heard an interesting podcast this weekend from Herp House Rock, where they were talking about the Burmese pythons and how they figured that was from dumping in Florida. And when they actually did a genetic test on them, it sounded like they had only found 4 different distinct genes out there in the wild. So all these snakes came from just 4 animals that got released, and they think that it was actually some importer had brought them in. A hurricane
Hurricane
hit
Andrew.
shore, and it blew them out into the wild, and a few of them actually managed to survive out there. But I don't know that for sure. That's just something that I thought I heard. Oh, Robin Melton said those are being banned in Michigan. Yeah, Michigan has a big law going on right now where
Yeah.
they're trying to start this. And what people don't understand is even if you fight it now and you win, they're going to come back. And if they do manage to get these laws in place, they're going to start going for everything. It's not going to end with just reptiles and tarantulas. It's
and
going to
No,
go.
it's
also too, from one state to the next, if
Mhm.
one state bans these animals and makes them illegal, that may set a precedent for another state. Also, like you said, other animals. And one of the most powerful organizations, PETA, is anti animal owning or eating of any kind. So I mean, if they have
not
their
even
way,
goldfish.
well, and it's not that they don't want the animals to live in captivity, they euthanize them
Mhm.
rather than having a goldfish live in a bowl
Mhm.
or a cat running around in a house doing whatever the hell they want all day. I would want to be a cat. I mean, most American domestic pets have a pretty sweet life. So, I mean,
And PETA is their the reason for them being has nothing to do with banning animals. They are actually they have political agendas. They want to become they want us to become the next communist country. I mean, that's their goal. And people don't realize that.
Do you guys remember back when they were trying to pass HR 669 about 15 years ago or something? The federal government itself was doing it for the Lacey Act. That they had a copy of a PETA email that they sent out, and they said if they got that passed, it was just going to be the stepping stone because they didn't even want you to have a goldfish in your house. That was that's their ultimate goal. No pets at all in your house. And I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty scary about what PETA's all about.
and their premise is that it's because it's inhumane to the animal. And come on.
The first thing they want to do is euthanize anything they get a hold of. So how is that humane?
Yeah.
But people also don't realize that PETA here, when all the animal sales became illegal on Facebook, PETA bought 5% of Facebook.
That's what happened there. Yep.
That's when all that stuff started going downhill for people being able to sell on Facebook. So PETA's just sticking their fingers everywhere they can, and they're very successful because they have a lot of power.
So people donate money to them because they give the idea that they're all about rescue work and conservation. And if you look at their statistics, which they don't make that readily accessible to the public, they euthanize more animals a year than any other agency. I mean, than animal control, than humane societies, which they have to euthanize animals because, there are more animals that go into shelters than can be cared for. I understand that. But people donate money to them, and ultimately it goes toward anti-animal lobbying and euthanization.
I had a lady who lived next door here. She was a PETA person. That's all. She could not believe keeping a snake in a container. She just had a fit about it. And I was like, when you go find them out in the wild, where are they at? They're underneath a rock or a log or something. It's no different. Well, when she died, we bought the house next to her, so we don't have to deal with that no more.
Well, and there's other places, other institutions popping up like this. PACFA in Colorado. Now they've made it to where you cannot have a snake rack because it's inhumane to keep them because they don't have lights on them.
Yeah.
Which most of your reptiles are nocturnal anyway. Not all of your snakes are nocturnal, but a lot of them are. And so if your kid has a hamster and wants to sell it, this was before it was illegal to sell animals on Facebook. You had to buy a $500 permit to sell a $3 hamster, in the state of Colorado, and it's still in place. I mean, these guys are they're terrorists. I mean, if they go into pet stores, and the pet store we had went into the week before, they had gone in there and made them shut down all their snake racks. Thousands of dollars worth of equipment they had to get rid of because it was
I
illegal.
think Altitude Exotics a couple of weeks back was talking about this. He's a gecko breeder. He breeds all kinds of crested geckos, and they showed up at his door, and he had to let them in because they had a warrant to check everything out, and they checked out every animal. You know what they got him on? He said he didn't have a roll of paper towels in the bathroom in the facility in his basement. He had to have a roll of paper towels in the bathroom, but he ended up having to fix it. But I think he said he got a fine for it or something. That's the only thing they could get him on. But that was that group in Colorado. Yeah.
They're scary. They really are. And being able to show up at your door, even if I don't want to get into it, but if they showed up my door, it'd be a little bit of a problem getting them. Well, we're in Texas. We're not Colorado.
Same here in North Dakota. You show up at my door.
You better be expecting
Let's just
something.
say we also believe in our rights as gun owners. We'll just say
Second
that.
Amendment. Yep.
Yeah.
So, Marshall, what else is your thoughts about all this that's going on with the laws that they're trying to institute, like in Michigan and where else? Well, in Florida, they instituted a few laws that they were supposed to be brought up in front of the board before they started proposing them, and overnight they just made them. Yellow anacondas is the one that comes to mind.
I think they added greens after that, didn't they?
I'm not sure.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear us, Marshall?
Is he
I think he
frozen or is
froze.
he just?
Uh-oh. It must be 80 or 90 below zero there.
Getting close. Getting close.
Can you hear us, Marshall?
John, I just have to say your beard game is
It's
it's up
growing.
there. Yeah, it's
Working
it's
on it. I
growing.
felt really bad after calling myself the beard with freaking Devin, right? Danny Damon. And then he
Yeah.
has like this long, luxurious freaking
Maine.
red beard going on. I was like, nope, time to step up my game. So it's getting
Marshall,
there.
can you hear us?
I think he's gone.
He'll chime back in if he.
Yeah, let me check on him.
Yeah.
I feel that it's just a stepping stone. It's just a start. Like you guys said, it will spread from one state to another because once one state gets it, especially Michigan, because Michigan's kind of you can have pretty much anything in Michigan. Once it gets that, then it'll spread. It would spread quick.
And there's been quite a few.
And I don't know if you read the bill. It's very vague. I mean, I got it right here. It's very, very it's only 6 pages and it's very, very vague. It's like when they talk about reptiles on there, they only mention a couple reptiles, but then they said it's not just limited to them, which means they can add whatever they want to it.
And that's the problem with most of these laws is that they like to add on to them once they're in place. Another state thing that happened to our home state now in Texas, a few years ago, they banned snake hunting. And their argument for it was it was too dangerous. Too many people were dying from snake or getting in car wrecks from snake hunting, stopping on the road and catching snakes. So for 2 years, it was perfectly legal to run them over and kill them, which is good conservation, in my opinion. Or you could just try to go around them, but you couldn't pick them up. But
yeah, if you stopped, got out a snake hook, and moved that snake off the road rather than running it over, you'd be in violation of the law.
Well, that's kind of strange, isn't it?
Yes.
Like Dave Kaufman says, we're going to protect ourselves and they're going to protect our species into extinction.
Well, they when they went back and actually got the law reversed, what ended up happening is they had to compromise. Now we have to wear reflective clothing. We have to have the license, which you always had to have. And it has to be like 110 square inches of reflective material. But when they went up there and proposed it, they made 2 big points that actually one was in their favor. One, they were costing the state a ton of money, and 2, there was never been a recorded car incident from somebody stopping for a snake in the state ever in the history of the state.
So that whole logic behind the law was completely t- fictional.
And when they instituted, what they did was they proposed it, and people were on top of it. They were getting they just about had it pushed out. And so what they did is they waited till 3 o'clock in the morning, attached it to a bill that benefits mentally handicapped people, and got it pushed through when no one was actually there.
You see how they
That-
do that?
Yeah. And that is, for one thing, why would you need to attach more than one law? It doesn't make any sense. If
Mm-mm.
somebody wants one of the two things and it's to benefit people that need the help, of course you're going to say, yes, that's the way I want to do it.
Well,
So
that's
now
how
you,
they get away with it, though.
yeah,
Like
but now
you,
in Texas you can't break for snakes now.
Well, and now in Texas, you have to pull off the side of the road, and you have to have that reflective material. And I don't know if there's any other rules.
Well, you have to have. Do you have to have a collecting permit
Yeah,
to
you
get
got to
out
have
and
a
move
collecting
them
permit.
off the road?
That's a gray area. I wouldn't
I
try
would
it.
say if you got pulled over and they asked what you were doing and you said I was moving the snake off the road and you had a hook, and if you didn't have a permit, they could potentially cite you. But I would think most cops wouldn't. They would, if that's kind of the thing with, oh well, basically suspicious activity, what are you doing? They see that it's harmless. Most law enforcement officers are just going to be like, oh okay, cool.
Now I expect that to spread to other states then too,
mhm.
because
Well,
Texas is a big state, so they kind of.
It is.
we talked to a fish and wildlife officer in New Mexico that said some guys were out and they were messing around with this gopher snake, and because he had told them to leave it alone and they didn't, he went ahead and fined them. And I'm not sure what he got them on, but they had to pay the fine. Now you were talking about something's going on in New Mexico.
Well, so just about the evolution of the laws through the years that we lived there.
Go ahead.
Well, so when we had our pet store, um trying to think of what was illegal in the state in general. You could keep venomous, you could keep rattlesnakes, you could keep crocodilians, you could keep exotics, you could keep most reptiles, anything that really basically wasn't federally or state protected. Most things you could keep. Oh, good, Marshal's back.
I thought he was. Oh, there he is. Can you hear us, Marshall? It must be storming up there.
Windy. It's really windy, so.
And might not place of wind. Go on.
Oh, so basically they just started picking things off. I feel like Charlie was kind of an integral part of that. He was kind of anti keeping in the private sector. And yeah, so that's, crocodilians. And then, of course, every county and every city has their own regulations. Um, then basically they started making it to where there were permits for certain things, but that they pretty much wouldn't issue those permits to anyone in the private sector for any reason other than it just kind of went against their personal opinion on whether or not people should keep them. So
And
ultimately, so a lot of things got banned. Birds,
well,
ball pythons.
let's start where that focusing point
Okay.
was. We know a guy that came out of Colorado that moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and for the life of me, I'm trying to think of his name.
Do you want to say it?
Yeah, he's the guy that passed away.
Oh, I thought you were talking about.
It's James Bear.
Oh,
James
I
Bear
thought you were
moved
gonna tell a
down there,
different
and
story.
he had hundreds of rattlesnakes, and he was actually allergic to them. Had been bit twice, and was told, if you ever get bit again, you're gonna die. But he did get bit. He died, and all of a sudden there was an uproar in New Mexico. This guy, he was in a trailer house, and he had over 200 snakes, and we just need to ban them. So at that time, they really started paying attention to what people were keeping.
That's right.
And unfortunately, most of the people that show up in the limelight are not people that you actually want showing in the limelight. The guy that gets drunk on Facebook and live streams
Joe
holding his
Exotic.
rattlesnake. Well, I actually think Joe Exotic, for he did some bad things, but
But I think he represented the cat community very poorly.
and you think Carol Baskins does a better
She's
job?
worse.
So basically, the representatives that people are looking at that are most famous are not the people that we necessarily want at the forefront. You know, the Brian Barczyk, he's a good guy to be up front. USARC, of course, we want at the very forefront, but
But they're not necessarily in the public eye, unfortunately.
Most people who get hurt end up in the public eye, though. So
That's
the
the
person
problem.
they don't ever focus on the person that's educating somebody. They focus on this one over here who got bit by this snake and is now
Well,
on life support.
that's not scary or interesting, Andrew, that someone's doing a good deed or educating people. What anything that can be vilified or sensationalized, that's good news in America right there.
Yeah, that's how they
So
go.
so when Bear got went to jail, there was a huge, or when he died, he got bit by a timber rattlesnake, a canebrake.
Mhm.
He was trying to pull it out of the bag, and it got him through the bag.
I remember when this made the news. Like, I
Yeah.
do. I very much so remember when that made the news.
Well, I knew the guy. I didn't know. I met him one time in a pet store just because he walked in a pet store. He had a copperhead in his hand. He was selling it. It wasn't a pictogaster, so I wasn't interested. But uh, and he seemed like an okay guy. He was very knowledgeable. I mean, he lived and breathed snakes. But he is keeping conditions. He decided he was going to just give up everything, take him and his kids, and move to New Mexico so that he could hunt, because banded rock rattlesnakes were his favorite snakes. So he had a pizza job. He worked at Pizza Hut or Domino's or somewhere, and kept all these snakes and traded them and sold them. So somebody had to come out of Texas here to get those snakes, and it was a big deal. Fish and Game were breathing down their neck the whole time they were packing these animals up. They didn't even want them there. They just wanted to go in and basically shoot them all. It was a
Oh,
bad deal.
actually, he didn't find this out until they actually called the store that his store that I was managing at the time, and they said, "Hey, do you think that you could help us come and safely move all these animals?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. Let me get back to you. It's really, it's just me running the store, and it's hard to get away." Heck no. I didn't want to get mixed up in that. No
Smart
way.
move.
I don't want you to
Marshal.
know my name. And later he says, "Oh man, well, why didn't you ever tell me that? Because you would have gone over there, fool."
Well, so to add insult to injury, actually somebody from Michigan moved down. They set up a zoo down in southwestern New Mexico, and they spent $2 million. Spent 2 years building this beautiful setup, perfect habitats.
Well, it was Bob Ashley.
I didn't want to say their name, but
Well, I think everyone
so
knows
they get
Bob
the
Ashley.
zoo all up and running. All their animals are still in Michigan under the care of somebody else, and they petition the Fish and Game for all their permits. They're a zoological institution. They built a zoological institution, and New Mexico Fish and Game turned them down. So they sued them, and for 6 months they fought them. And we heard on the back end that Fish and Game almost went bankrupt in New Mexico fighting them. And at the end, they gave them any permit they wanted, but this was all hindered from around James Bear and the bad taste in Fish and Game's mouth from people wanting to bring reptiles in. And these guys, if you ever been in their facility, it's immaculate, and there are no rules broken in their environment. If you step out of line too much, like you're tapping on the glass, they will ask you to leave. There is no mismanagement or mishandling of animals in
Everything
their
is
facility.
pristine. I mean, it's like a museum. It's beautiful. It is a museum.
And it at that time they could have broke down all the laws in New Mexico, but of course, they were concerned about themselves. They had their own worries to fight. But if we would have had $5,000-$10,000, we probably could have got things straightened out a little bit in New Mexico, saying, all right, we've got this permit for crocodilians. You need to be able to let us try to meet the requirements that you require to be able to keep them and successfully raise them. Because New Mexico is not a place where an alligator could get out and live in the sewers. It's too cold. So it's not it's not an environment danger. It's just an endanger to the people that keep them. And they're not a pet for everybody, but there are people that are willing to spend the money to properly manage them. So you need to have that opportunity, especially if the state provides it for you.
So do you think any of this is ever going to like spill over to the like tarantula side of things? I mean,
Oh,
they've got a few things that are.
absolutely. They're a
They
venomous
already have
animal.
them.
Yeah.
Well, I know
And
they have some, but I mean,
Well, no, I'm saying there's even on the Michigan bill, I believe there's a
Did they
few
include any invertebrates in the
species
Michigan bill?
of invertebrates that were added into that Michigan bill.
say that again.
Do you know if there were any invertebrates included on the Michigan bill? I don't recall. It seems like there
You said
was.
you have it, right, Andrew?
yeah, I got it right here. I can look real quick. Got to stick
So
my glasses on. I'm not as young as I used to be. Let me see.
Tom and Mike boys, I know you can hear me because you're on the chat. Anytime you want to get together and talk to me about anything you want to talk about, let's do it.
I think
Anytime.
I think that's my super duper big fan from Roswell.
You think that's Anna Dina?
I do.
Ah, she's back in jail, ain't she?
She's very special. She's very passionate.
You gotta love the haters. So
The stalkers.
That's
the
one of the
weirdos.
things we gotta fix when we get off of this live. Just set me
Is
up as a
moderating?
mod on your channel so that I can
Oh
just
yeah.
kick that fucking shit off.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't paying too much attention to it.
The
So-
bill's mainly about reptiles. I don't see any invertebrates on here at all.
The problem is that any classification for venomous reptiles or tarantulas meet all those classifications.
Right.
So any city that has a law against venomous reptiles, the day that they want to ban them, all they have to do is say they fall under the venomous reptile rule, and that was something that we actually discussed in Montana. You back?
I'm back. And
Yay.
if you guys want to stick around, I'm just going to take and toss this out the window.
And we have a burn party. Is there
Yeah,
going to be a burn pit involved?
Exactly. I'm sitting there trying to restart it and reset it and this, and then I go to reset the whole computer or restart the whole computer. Oh, we're going to update it. Give us an hour.
The main thing that's on this bill is all about just like basic monitors and like I don't know, unless you're like some kind of a professor or something working with sea snakes. I don't see you having sea snakes, but that's actually on the bill.
Yeah, I saw that too. And they're a very difficult species. It seems like crates are on there too, which there are a few of them in the United States, but they're extremely difficult to keep in captivity. So, Marshall, we talked about the New Mexico law. About I don't know if were you listening to any of that, or were you throwing your wind?
I was frantically trying to get my computer figured out, and then I just switched over to my phone now. So I missed everything. Everything.
What we talked about is that there was a guy in New Mexico named James Bear that moved from Colorado and had a big reptile collection. He died from a venomous snake bite, and it was his third bite, and he knew that if he got bit any more times, he was going to pass away. It was going to kill him.
Mhm.
So the Fish and Game in New Mexico all of a sudden started really paying attention to everybody that had reptiles after that happened, and there was a zoo that actually was installed, put in place in Southwest New Mexico. This company, these people spent $2 million in their facility, and they applied for all the permits to keep animals in there because they had quite a venomous collection and exotic animals, and they were denied by the state of New Mexico. So they actually had to sue the state of New Mexico to get those permits, and they were eventually granted to them. But it was understanding under a financial stress to the Fish and Game of Fish and Wildlife of New Mexico. They basically ran out of money, so they couldn't fight them anymore.
Well, and they essentially told that one person, you can have whatever you want, because he had proven that he definitely was equipped.
Mhm.
But it didn't help. They were able to turn back like the birds and ball pythons and things that never should have been made illegal. But for a
Yeah.
little while there, almost everything was illegal. And thanks to that one person in his billion-dollar pocketbook, but
Yeah.
he, as soon as he got what he needed, he said, okay, I'll leave it up to the rest of you guys now. And
Yeah.
so, it's unfortunate. I mean, if you're a trillionaire, eventually you can get what you want. But
Right.
for us working class people that we're just working to support our animals and our own businesses,
Yep.
you're at the mercy of the law. It's
Right.
amazing what you've done. Amazing. I admire you.
Well, it's kind of interesting as I sit and listen to all these different instances in different states, and basically there are laws and ordinances that are being set up that want to take away people's rights, their freedoms, and some of them, like you discussed, are ridiculous. There was one time during all those meetings where I had kind of a light bulb go off in my head, and I'll never forget it. There was a gentleman that was sitting in the back of the room, and I don't know why he caught my attention, but the whole time he sat there and he had his arms crossed, listening, and just kind of this scowl on his face. And we were discussing reptiles and snakes, and he just sat there scowling. And we opened up our meeting to anyone that wanted to speak. And I'll never forget, he stood up from the back of the room, probably in his 60s. He's an older gentleman, and he just stood up, and all he said, he just pointed straight at me, and he's like, "If you want to keep snakes, get out of town." And and that was really all he said. And I remember just feeling this wave of anger, come over me. And then I don't know, one of the biggest things I learned when dealing with these animal issues, ordinances and whatnot, there's a lot of heated feelings on both sides of the table. That's one thing you always have to remember, whether you're for or against. People get heated about this stuff. And I didn't know what to say at first, because my blood was boiling. But I do remember, I was like, I understand your point, sir. And, I don't expect everybody to enjoy reptiles. I don't expect everybody to love a snake. I don't expect that of anybody. But what I'm trying to get the message out is that this is something that I want to enjoy in the privacy of my own home. I don't expect you to come over to my house. I don't expect my neighbors to come over to my house to come look at my reptiles. I'd love that, but I don't expect it. So I just looked at him, and I'm not asking what you think about a snake. What I'm asking is, let me enjoy what I want in the privacy of my home. If someone comes knocking at your door and says, "Guns kill," I don't think anybody should own a gun. Are you going to turn it? "Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go get my rifles and my handguns out of my bedroom. I'm going to give them up to you because you're afraid, or you don't feel that I should have these in my own home." And I think organizations like the NRA could be, that was the kind of like the light bulb that went up my head. We tend to get into these battles with government agencies and going over ordinances and lawyers that cost a lot of money. And when it comes right down to it, what we're fighting for is our freedoms and our rights. And one of those big proponents of freedoms and rights, of course, are the NRA. And I think things like the USARC need to kind of reach out to the NRA and those types of organizations to get that kind of funding to help us fight these battles on a government level. And I think just having that conversation with that guy, when I mentioned guns, and he was like, "Oh, no, you're not taking my guns away." Right. I mean, it's not the same thing, but there is parallels there.
Oh, definitely.
And one of the things about all this is that it's bringing us together, which we are an organization of people that are disorganized. We worry about ourselves. We're very encapsulated amongst each other. And
Yeah.
the reason that dogs and cats and all those have fish, there's all birds all have more protection is because those people all got organized years ago because they were looking at these laws themselves.
Mhm.
Also, it's a
Yep.
much larger community. So, they pool their money, they pool their assets. It's a
Yeah.
huge bankroll. Us reptile people are definitely in the minority. Thankfully, not as much as it was 20 or 30 years ago, but still we're outcasts in
Yeah.
a lot of groups.
Yeah.
Well,
So
And
they're
I think
also
being a minority is kind of, in a way, that's something that can play to our advantage in the fact that, like I had mentioned, if we can reach out to these other huge organizations and tell them to look, yes, they're trying to take away snakes from us, but look at what they're trying to do. They're trying to take away our freedom.
Right.
That strikes a chord with all these major organizations. When you start talking about taking away rights and freedoms, all of a sudden it's like, what? What? Where can I help?
I think they try to push it off as they're trying to protect the public.
Yeah.
And there's only like a couple cases where like the 2 kids in Canada were killed by that snake. And that's why they passed a lot of laws in Canada. And I think it was a little girl in Florida, but that was her own family thing. But I've never heard of any public, like Joe Schmo walking down the street getting attacked by somebody's snake. You hear about it with dogs all the time, but you never hear about it with
Exactly.
anybody's reptiles.
Well,
and that's
go ahead.
that's an issue that needs to be brought up about this. You're talking about animals, people that have died from venomous snakes and big, large snakes. The thing is, if they want to look at us for that stuff, they need to look straight across the board. The animal that kills more people every year in the United States, that's considered a pet, they're not really, is a horse. Horses
Yeah.
kill more people in the United States every year, but they're still legal. I mean, there is certain things you have to do to be able to keep them. They've got to be registered. They've got to be licensed, and we're not. We're none of us are saying that we just need to be able to have free reign. The one thing that has been brought to my attention is if we could self regulate ourselves, then the government won't have any need to do it. And that's actually what Colorado did. That PACFA coming in was in the motions of self regulating. The problem is they found a little bit of power and they went ape over it. And that's the problem with trying to institute regulation is you start talking about, well, this is what it's going to say as far as big snakes. And then somebody's going to come and they're going to say, well, if it's 6 foot, what happens if my ball python gets over 6 foot? Well, what do you do? Is that still a legal snake? It's exempted, and then people want to get all nitpicky about how those laws need to be regulated, and there's so many problems with it, and none of it. We're all so busy taking care of animals. None of us have time to sit down and start writing laws and start reviewing people that are saying they're in violation of the laws, and we need to try to find a way to, like USARC, they're fighting for our rights. We need to have something like that everybody pays so much a year to help keep us all in line to make sure that we're following the letter of the law, and so that we don't lose these laws. And
USARC does do that.
well, they're fighting for us. They're not regulating us.
Oh, I see.
We need to have some kind of a regulatory committee that can be considered fair, because it's not going to work out for everybody. We're gonna, it's good, like you said, there's going to have to be.
But I
some
feel
give
like
and
it
take.
needs to be, the decisions need to be fact based, not opinion based, because that one guy that gets in there may not like retics or may not care for ball pythons or may not, you know what I mean? I don't think it should be opinion based at all. I think it should be purely fact and research based.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is we started fighting a lot of ordinances in an uphill battle from the start, because a lot of these ordinances that are in place were instituted a long time ago, before a lot of facts and knowledge was out there.
When it also was illegal for a woman to live alone without her parents or a husband. Those times.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, when you look back, I traced back as far as I could with the ordinance being in place in Minot. I wasn't able to get a timeline of when it was put in place, but I did talk to a few of the older people around town, and it seemed to be the common opinion or the common belief that a lot of the ordinances were placed there because of religious purposes. You know, so however that got started, I don't know, but and whether or not that's true, I'm not 100% sure. But you know, I mean, you do hear that those instances come up where a lot of these ordinances are placed, and it's based upon religious beliefs in a community.
Wow. It's definitely biased, and it's not a decision that's made for any logical or reasonable purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, not even looking at reptiles. So there's this place called Anson, Texas, right? It's right outside of Austin. They still, to this day, have a law that says you are not allowed to publicly dance in that town. You are not allowed to dance. It is like legitimately footloose. But I'm saying, like, if the cops decided to freaking cite you for it, they have the right to cite you still because of an old religious made up law so that kids wouldn't go and have premarital sex and things like that because dancing with the opposite sex means that you will have sex with them and stupid stuff like that. But and a lot of the reptile stuff, like I was trying to say before, it's a sub article of whatever comes in, right? So they put in like this handicap article, or they put in this freaking betterment for whatever in children. The betterment for children or something for a playground or freaking whatever it is, right? And they put this law in at like midnight or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they have that sub article banning the reptiles because they know it's not going to get looked at because we're all busy either with our reptiles at 3 o'clock in the morning or we're freaking sleeping because we're normal human beings. And it goes a week and a half or 2 weeks before anything gets brought up about it, and they already have ground. And that's where the issues come in. So when you're going to like your what are they called? Your city halls, and you're getting ready for your balloting for the year in your local areas. They're supposed to give you a way to read everything that's up for ballot at that time. So it's just taking the time to really look into it, which is the shitty part. That's why US Arc is so amazing, because they do it for it all, right? Yeah. We're, as much as we're not lazy, we're a bunch of lazy motherfuckers. Plain and simple.
No.
Well, real quick, maybe one of you guys can answer this. Bullet 5150 said, how many states still exist with no laws against reptiles or crocodilians other than prohibiting native species? And I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I think maybe Michigan might be one of them, and that's why they're trying to do this now, because you can have almost anything there, I think. I don't know what the laws are, but I mean, like Brian Barczyk said, if this law goes into effect, he can't even keep his alligators or nothing.
And problem is, they even if he can get the permits, the cost of keeping his animals the way that they require him to are too expensive. There's no way that he could survive and take care of his animals at the same time.
And as for laws and states, I think that some states might not have laws, but cities will, and towns will, and counties will, and it goes
local ordinance that play into it. And that's something that we're just not going to know. Like you can cover down on the 50 states, but at the end of the day, we're not going to know every county. We're not going to know every city, every town. There's no way to.
Yeah.
And the only reason that US Arc has it is once it goes into a local area, it gets passed up to a federal level. So that's why they're able to pull it. But until someone hears about it, none of us are going to know.
Fuzznut said, "Look what happened years ago in Florida with the burn ban. We gave them a few species so we keep the rest. Now they're using the same methods to go after the rest of the reptiles."
That's what they
Uh,
do.
and
That's
Pet
what it is.
Exotic said, "I think the fish hobbyists and the reptile hobbyists should come together," which actually reptiles are described under fish. It's ichthyology is where you used to go to look for all the descriptions of reptiles. So that would make perfect sense. And the fish hobby is pretty banned. They're pretty organized, and they've already been fighting this war for longer than we have.
Oh yeah, because there's fish that are banned that are like, why would you ban that?
Puffer fish. Jesus.
So Robin Melton said, "I'm trying to find the sources of the Michigan bill. He'll keep us posted." It's scary because there, like Marshall said, there are no laws that give you rights, only laws that take them away. And
Yep.
there are so many laws being put into effect every day. And basically, it's to the point now in the United States where you really can't go to work every day without violating at least some law in some way, shape, or form. Most people, it's violating the speed limit, but there are other things out there that people are unaware of. So, trying to stay aware of what's going on in the United States with the reptile laws is very important. And USART posts that stuff on their website for free. Everybody that's here listening, you guys need to check that out and just check it weekly, and they will give you updates on what they've managed to help put down and things that are coming into play.
And go create a membership. It is
Yeah,
not
yes.
expensive.
Yeah.
Create
Yeah.
a membership.
If
Like-
you can, but if you can't, one thing you can do to contribute to the cause is to stay informed and talk to other people about it. Get on
Mhm.
your Facebook groups, talk to your people at your community places, pet stores, and whatnot.
And that was the one of the big thing about our channel is that we wanted to educate people to reduce the fear, because most of these laws are really based in just irrational fear. Not all of them, but a lot of them start with somebody being afraid of snakes or spiders.
Well, and two, what the media is telling people, what people's grandparents told them 40 years ago. I mean, it's a lot of it's based in superstition and fallacy. And so what we find is if people take even a mild interest and learn about the animals, usually they're no longer afraid and interested. And I just find it very interesting, and it's we we live in a time where we have access to so much information and so many highly educated people and such an organized government. How can they be writing these laws that are not based on scientific evidence? If you looked at the python ban, there was essentially a straight line going across the United States saying they're not a danger here because they can't survive, but they are a danger here because they could. Well, that's not really how the environment works.
That line crossed the Rocky Mountains, and there's no way that a Burmese python is going to live on the top of a mountain.
I mean, it was,
in the wild.
you could have given a first grader a crayon and went, make the decision now, and they went, and it would have been just as scientifically sound.
I think they kind of tried to base that on science due to the fact that all crocodilians live within a certain line, a band around the world, you know? And I think they figured, well, we'll do that with the snakes up to here, they'll just...
Well,
But it's a little different in the land than it is
Oh,
out
yeah.
in the ocean.
Oh,
So
no, I agree.
They
There's
didn't
no...
take that into account.
I mean, it was a noble idea in theory, but it there wasn't any follow through on that thinking. I mean, why didn't someone say, hold on, guy, is that scientifically sound? They just went, looks good to me. All right.
That's a Discovery Channel for you.
And here's something that's really interesting that I've always been fascinated about that nobody's saying is that they're telling us that all these animals we have in captivity could never be taken and set back out in the wild if they were to stop burning down all the timber, the forests, and
If
the
somehow the
wetlands,
environment were saved.
that there's no way that they could go back out in the wild. And in the same breath, they say, well, you can't have this animal because it might get out and live in the wild. So how is that scientifically accurate? You can't play both sides of the fence on that.
I agree with that.
They do it every day.
You shouldn't do it, is what we should say.
I think if they put more endangered species into private hands, they wouldn't be endangered as long, because I think people.
Well, that's
I think
been proven. I mean, look at how many animals were initially smuggled into our country that now have captive populations in the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, I think the private breeder does a much better job than nature and scientists do when it comes to.
Well,
very, very interesting discussion with Garrett Hartle a few years ago. You know, I mean, he's specializing and he is going hardcore into bringing back pure locality super dwarfs. You know, and in talking with them, you know, and talking about those locality islands out in the middle of the ocean. Some of them are 1.5 miles, 2 miles across. You know, who's to say some tsunami doesn't come out and wipe out an entire island, wiping out essentially an entire, you know, subspecies of super dwarf reef, you know. So within his facility, he could be, you know, holding back the only bloodlines of these localities. You don't know. You never know.
And there was a book that came out. I guess we were told that there's a new version of it going to be coming out called The Invisible Ark. And in that book, it states that everybody that keeps an animal or a plant is part of this ark to help support and sustain these animals and plants for future generations. And what they say in the book is that there are tens or hundreds of millions of dollars spent on zoological institutions, and there are billions spent in the private hobby.
Individually, cumulatively. And here's the thing, we're a larger entity. We have more power, we have more brains, we have more time, we have more money. All of us together as a conglomerate are a powerful, powerful force. So if we have an interest, if we have a passion, if we're willing to spend our time and our energy and our money to help these animals and to learn about them and breed them, ultimately, potentially, like Marshall said, the animals that Garrett's working with, that could potentially save an entire species. Okay. He's on call, so if he gets a phone call, he has to answer. Why would they discourage that? Why would they not want to allow that?
Because the money's not in it for them.
Well,
exactly.
someone in the comment feed was asking why they why, you know, these laws are being put into place. And I said that they're based on fallacy, but that also the government has a financial motivation. If they can fine us for all these wild little infractions, look how many of us there are. That's a huge bill that they're getting coming in. It's a whole new source of revenue. You'd think though that I mean, it's also a huge industry. Why wouldn't they just like tax us on the money that we earn? I mean, that I would think would be more profitable than fining
they
us.
already do that. They tax you on them. They tax you on the taxes that you pay for the money that you've already earned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I'm saying is what's the flaw here? Let us spend our money. Let us spend our time. It's basically people that are just biased against reptiles for the most part. And then other people who have ulterior, darker motives, such as PETA, who want, you know, political tyranny. They're scary.
Well, and then you've got Packfoot, which is really scary because they did come out of nowhere. It was like one day somebody in Congress said, you know, we need to do something about all these animals in these pet stores. And one guy happened to be at the right place at the right time. He said, well, if you want, we can set up a regulatory committee and start monitoring this. And overnight, they were coming in like, who was it that was saying they came over to their came to their door.
Altitude
And,
Exotics.
yeah. So it's scary how all this can just snowball.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy I was on the phone with he was actually a friend out of Colorado that's being affected by this pack-full law. So I told him to get on and say something.
I've got to shout out Amy and Ramiro, two of my homies that are here in the comment feed. I love you guys.
So we just need to keep fighting. You can't give up. And so what we did in 98 is we actually hired a lobbyist and got that lobby down by sending the letters in and all of that. Marshall went to his town meetings and addressed the issue because nobody was even aware it was there. Andrew, you also went to the meetings too,
Yes.
right? So if this was happening in somebody else's county the same way that it hit you guys, what would you tell them to do now that you've gone through the fight?
Well, I would, for one, don't be getting nasty with anybody because that'll get you nowhere. Don't go in there yelling and screaming and causing trouble because that'll just make them think, well, this guy's crazy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Prove out your facts. You know, make sure you got your facts. I had to have my facts straight as to these animals are not going to survive in the wild here. You know, they're no different than keeping an aquarium like I was with the lady down here. Contact USARK because like I did that too, and they sent out this whole thing for me to follow like they did with Marshall, and they even sent the information to all the board members and all that, and it does help. They're very important to support USARK, and just don't ever give up.
Yeah.
Keep pushing forward.
I think John had asked me that question on our live stream together. I think one of the most important things that I tell people, especially in a local government environment, a local city council or county commission or whatever, is just show up. Sitting back from your computer to put together a petition is not going to change anything. Go to these meetings. Go speak with some of the council members. Speak with the commissioners. Make yourself known and make yourself present is really important, because otherwise you're just someone that's writing in an email, or you're just somebody who's writing in a letter, somebody that's starting up a petition that most likely won't go anywhere without being present. So
I will say that could put you in a real hot seat, though, whether you like it or not.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. I was a very, very noticeable person after the city council meeting. And
so we have one viewer who's asking, I think we're kind of like winding down, but we have one viewer who's asked to join, which we told people that they could. So we're going to jump on our email. Marshall, go ahead and finish what you were saying, and we're going to work to let this person on the chat.
Yeah, I think I pretty much covered it. I mean, it's just, make yourself known, be present. And yeah, you said it could make yourself a target, and most definitely can. And then getting back to what Andrew was speaking, that's a really important time to keep your cool, fight with facts and information. Don't fight with words and hysteria.
Well, that's also the time to make sure that your collection is the best that you've ever kept it, because
exactly, you want to make sure
you're going to start the fight. It's going to come. So that inspection's about to come. You better keep your shit.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, the other thing that nobody's mentioned that I think you should do is, if this does start happening in your area, you need to get together with anybody you know that keeps the same type of animals that you have, and try to get the word spread that this is happening, and try to get as many people involved as possible, because like we were talking about, some of this stuff is going on at 3:00 in the morning, and it's a lot easier to monitor with 10 heads than it is just with one person trying to deal with this.
No, go ahead.
That's it.
I was just going to say, and not to mention, a lot of these committee people might think that Marshall's just one guy who has this weird little interest. But if they realize that there's actually a community within their community that's spending money, educating people, doing something fruitful with their time. That might change their perspective right there. For example, if there's one grungy kid with a skateboard that says, hey, build me a skate park, the city's probably not going to do anything about it. But if they realize there's 200 kids out there that, would love to be skateboarding rather than, loitering or whatever,
What
they
we
might
did
go,
when I was in high
okay,
school.
well, maybe we should build a skate park.
Yeah, that's what I did. We literally went out and we talked about how we were looked at as the miscreants or the druggies and stuff like that. And we're like, well, we don't have anywhere to go. You're making us hide in the shadows. You're making us look like the bad people. So build us a skate park. And it took like 3 years of fighting it, but they finally got it. And now they have competitions that are ran there. Well, besides this past year, obviously, but every summer they do 2 or 3 competitions for sponsorships to help these kids have a chance to do something with their lives, because that's all they know.
That's awesome.
So it's all about how you approach it and how long you're willing to make that fight. And we keep going over that topic, but it's really all this is, and staying informed. Like, if you're not willing to do the work yourself to stay informed, then do you really care if they take your animals? You're going to say that you do right now, but if you're not looking into your local laws, like,
Well,
I know plenty of people that keep here locally that didn't know that you had to have a freaking, it's $15 for a retic license or for a big snake license here locally. $15 a year.
And you
And
buy
all
it
they
at
have to
Walmart.
do, yeah. And all you have to, well, you have to have Fish and Game come in too and inspect it. That's the hard part. So you're on like a month to 2 month waiting list, right? Waiting for your day to show up, and they could show up from fucking 5 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night.
right.
You know what I mean? They can show up basically whenever they want. So you have to keep everything ready. And then you have to prove, hey, I have the facilities to do this. I have the ability to do this. And after you do that, it's just renewing it every year. It's $15. You don't get re-inspected. You just pay your money and go. And that's all they really want. And it'll keep them at bay for now. But once you give them the right to take anything, they're going to continue following that path. The more they can take and the more they can control and the more they can tax, as bad as this sounds, this is how every major civilization has worked throughout history.
There has to be a
If this is
financial
going to be any
reason.
different. Yeah. You think that this is going to be any different, you're wrong.
Yeah, and I've been saying this several times when we've been online, is that there has to be a financial reason to save animals in the wild. There has to be a financial reason to keep them in captivity. And it's not talking about us, as we need to make money selling snakes. It's the people that are putting these laws in place. They have to have a reason to do it, because if there's no money in it, it's easier for them to just ban it. That's what they're going to do. But if there's a way that they can turn around and make a little bit of change while they're a little bit of money while they're doing this, they're more likely to go for it than if it's going to cost them money, for sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because I even suggested that with the city, when it was getting to be the big fight, I suggested maybe we need a permit system, come out and inspect and charge me a permit fee and we'll do it. But it ended up being, once I brought the fish in and the lady figured she would lose her, because her whole thing was 4 pets, that's it, nothing. Once I pulled the fish in, she kind of resigned. She resigned right off the board right there that day. It was over. It was done. So,
yeah,
but I still keep it watch out, because you never know when somebody's going to get in there and be like, I think this should be done or that should be done. Marshal, are you still on the board of at Minot up there?
With the city council,
Yeah.
No. The only thing after we adjourned our ad hoc committee, city council took all my information as usual, phone number and email address. They told me if they have any other ordinance or if they were going to start up the committee again, they would contact me for that. But as far as that, I'm just kind of waiting to hear. They did actually. They were going to contact me about writing up something concerning the county. I didn't get the full details on it, and I never got clarification on what they wanted to talk to me about. But I was told that Sitma, the mayor, was going to be reaching out to me to go over some of the ordinances in the county. But that's the last I heard from that.
That's one of the things I was going to jump on too. Like Andrew, you're saying that your city or town doesn't require the permits, but you got to look the 2 steps above that too, right? So you got to look at your city, and just because your city doesn't require it,
The county
the might. And even if the county doesn't, I guarantee you the state requires some sort of permit.
Well, like I said,
That's why I have to. I don't have to because of my county or my city. I have to because of the state.
well, it's with the bigger stuff like the retics and the berms and stuff. But then when you get into like the berms, like I said, the requirements to keep a berm according to the state is kind of ridiculous. But then, like, I know there's a guy in Minot who has them, and they came out and seized his berm, but they ended up giving it back to him because they couldn't take care of it. And because, and that was in Minot, right where you're at.
That was Rod, right?
Yeah, I think so. They ended up giving it back to him because they couldn't take care of it.
Yep. And then even going back to that, even if it's any kind of permits or licensing with the bigger animals, even that's still kind of fuzzy because according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which in North Dakota is supposed to kind of oversee animal ordinances and animal laws, because every animals around here for the most part are considered livestock, because we're such a big farming state and farming community. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture is supposed to oversee animal laws. So they have no laws concerning the bigger animals, but then supposedly you're supposed to get a license or permit through
the veterinary department.
Right, through the veterinary department. It's like, so depending on what person in North Dakota you talk to, it's either you have to have a license or you don't have to have a license.
I think it all depends on where you live too. Like if you live out in the country, there's nobody's gonna say nothing to you. But if you live in a bigger city where, like you do, and your neighbor finds out you have this big snake, they're gonna be like, "Wait a minute, I saw a report that they can eat me or something," and that's how that goes down.
Well, somebody just sent SD Reptiles WI, which is Wisconsin, said 10 out of 10 animals that were studied died from exposure to cold temps. It is a pretty good read. He actually sent the article. So he says, let's see, if they cannot survive as far north as South Carolina, there's no need for bans on Michigan or other northern states, which North Dakota is just as cold as Michigan, if not colder.
I could take a bull snake that lives here and put it outside right now, and it wouldn't last a day. It would be dead in a couple hours.
So this is the gentleman that wants to be added to the stream. I'm not sure if it's a kid or not. If it is, I'm going to have to tell him that he can't be on here, but let's try this. Isaiah, can you hear us?
Heck yeah.
All right. Just a quick question. How old are you?
16.
Oh, I'm sorry you got to be 18 to be on here, but is there something that you wanted to say about all this, or somebody you wanted to say hello to?
Well, what I have to say about all this is I'm proud of the United States banning reptiles.
How come?
All right.
We got trolls and a half in here.
I like all those facts he was backing that up with. Thanks for coming on.
There needs to be more ordinances on.
I'm proud of you voicing your opinion as a 16-year-old. Good for you.
Well, you know,
everybody needs their moment in the sun, guys.
Yeah. That was awesome.
So and most of the things that are kept that are considered exotic couldn't live in New Mexico. New Mexico is actually gets very cold. Where we lived, it wasn't very unusual for it to get 9 degrees at night. And there's you've got to when these guys are trying to institute all these laws, they need to be thinking about this too. But it doesn't seem to be a factor in their opinions when they're trying to ban this stuff.
Yeah.
I agree. Arizona gets cold. I mean, my sister lived in Phoenix for 20 years, and it got down in the 20s, the teens. So
The desert gets colder than people think. Just because I'm in a sleeveless shirt right now doesn't mean it's not cold outside.
And the scary part is that, okay, number one, a lot of these ordinances are so old, a lot of people don't know about them. Number
Right.
two, a lot of these ordinances get placed because there's some sort of a backdoor deal. You know, one politician wants this from another politician, so they agree. Well, if you put this into this bill, and then you let me put this into another bill, and then of course, like we know that PETA is more of a political agenda over everything else, and
Right.
so a lot of these ordinances aren't being put into effect because they're based on facts or any of that, but it's a political agenda to get what the next guy wants from this guy. That's the scariest part about all this, is a lot of these things they're putting into place is just because you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Yep.
Little quid pro quo.
Yeah.
So, do you have any thoughts on what we could do to fight on that front? How do we stop this? Is there any way to stop this from happening? Somebody scratching somebody else's back to try to get these laws put in place.
Oh,
It's
God,
a tough
that-
question. I know.
I think we need to have more people that are reptile keepers in political positions.
Yeah.
That way they're there, and then they know what's going on, and they can be like, no, I don't think so, you know. But like you
Yeah.
said, they always slip that little thing in at 3:00 in the morning because not even all the politicians are there at 3:00 in the
Right.
morning, you know.
Well,
Right,
I feel like an important step we can take is just being the best role models that we can be. Obviously, being exemplary citizens to the best of our ability, caring for our animals to the best of our ability, using our animals for good and not evil. You know, one peeve I have is when people use their animals to like prank or scare people.
Yeah.
I can't stand that because there's already so many people that are phobic and irrationally afraid. Sometimes it'll just take one negative experience for someone to pretty much decide that they hate any animal that's related to that for the rest of their lives. And on the other hand, somebody could have a few brief positive experiences and it starts at least a curiosity or an interest. And so I would just say, doing everything as we can, everything that we can individually, and then also obviously banding together as a community, donating to USARC, staying informed, all of that.
I know in Fargo, which is another city here in North Dakota, they had a ban on all snakes there too. Not all snakes, but snakes that got over a certain size, I believe it was. And
Yeah.
that was all based on, and I even talked to the mayor there because I had called him because they were trying to really enforce this. And I called him and he actually called me back, which I was shocked. But he said the whole thing comes down to was like this old lady who was really scared of snakes. And the only reason they put that in was to satisfy her, to keep her from coming down and starting all kinds of trouble at the meetings. But he says, if you're not outside walking around with around your neck, they're not going to say nothing to you. You can have them in your house. There's nobody coming to your door. But then I says, well, how do you know that the next people that are in charge ain't going to really say, this is a law? No, you're not doing that.
Or
So I don't know
just
where it went.
the
from there.
individual interpretation of the law enforcement officer. If they decide they don't like you, or if you get a law
Mhm.
enforcement officer that is anti-reptile, man, they can drag you down to your grave with that stuff if they want to.
Well, now they have a reptile show in Fargo, which they never used to. Now they have that there, which is pretty good. You go every year, don't you, Marshall? And then they also used to have a ban on tarantulas there, and I don't know if that's still there because now they sell them there too. They used to, no tarantulas is what it was inside city limits, but now that's changed, I think.
As far as with Fargo, I think what they've done was instead of like over a certain size, you need to have a license or you had to go down and get a permit or something. I think that's what they kind of agreed upon on both sides of the issue. Instead of just outright banning over a certain size, well, if you want that size, you have to get a license.
Well,
Which I think that's a fairly decent compromise. I mean, I have no problem if you want to have laws or ordinances against a species or an animal. I think why not going for a license or a permit? I think is I guess an acceptable compromise. I think.
I would rather go for a permit, like you said, or a license instead of a total ban, because that's what happens. They end up coming up with a total ban, and then you don't have any rights to none of that. I'd rather have it, fine, come out and inspect my stuff,
Yeah.
Well, I think.
Oh, go ahead, JD. I'm sorry.
I think that we should be judged on the same board that everybody else is judged. That if you can keep a horse, and like Andrew, you're talking about this lady who only wanted 4 snakes, then it should be equal amongst all these. Okay, you're talking about dangerous animals. People want to keep venomous snakes, and most of the venomous snake bites that occur do not occur in captivity with these people that keep them. They occur out in the wild when people are getting drunk and want to show off for their friends. That's where most of our venomous snake bites happen in the United States. So how is that judging us fairly? I mean, if I know there are dog bans, but there aren't a lot of horse bans. I mean, you can't have horses in city limits. If they're going to do it, they need to do it straight
equitably.
across. Yeah, it's something that a fish keeper can keep this species, which could be considered dangerous
or invasive,
but we can't. I mean, it needs to be straight across the board. We need to quit being judged unfairly.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Cows kill more people than they're right up there with horses too.
Yep. And again, we need to come back to the gun laws. How many people die from guns? And I don't want to use that as an argument because it's not fair. I am all for having guns. Everybody should be able to keep them because that's in our Constitution. But if you want to talk about dangerous things, driving down the street in your car, that kills way more people than. And since we're talking about this, COVID's killing more than heart disease, so we should just ban that too.
There you go. I like that. I'm all for that ban.
Just wanted to Isaiah, the snake's for you since you love reptiles so much. This is my beautiful banana clown that I got not too long ago from Earl Jones at Lone Star.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Oh, I love him. So, since Isaiah had the courage to come on and make a big stand, I had to get a snake out just to show him how beautiful snakes are.
You couldn't have found someone better to buy from than Earl. Come on.
You can't say stuff like that when I'm involved in the video, okay?
Hey,
I know.
find me a better banana clown anywhere in the world. I dare you.
No, I know. Or a better guy. Okay.
Yeah, amen to that. And Ren as well.
Yeah.
Big shout out to them.
Speaking of which, when are you guys going to come down to Texas for a reptile show?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny.
When COVID's over?
My daughter's mother, her stepdad, he's in the Air Force stationed in San Angelo. So we've been kind of kicking around the idea when school gets out, just taking a little cross country tour to take her to spend the summer with her mom. So that might be in the books. I don't know. We'll see how this has been one crazy year. So we'll see how things turn out.
Yeah.
I would love to get down there.
I think it would be great to go to Texas, like to the an ARBC show down there. I think that would be an awesome show to go to for sure.
It definitely is.
He doesn't want to insult
A lot of good people attend that show
Yeah.
and vent that show. It's just a wonderful experience. Some of these people that have mentored us or been mentors of ours that we haven't got to meet, we actually got to stand and talk to them at these shows. And
Mm-hmm.
it's an amazing experience.
Now, here's a question for you guys. Now down there in Texas, are they allowed to sell hognose snakes at these shows or no?
Hognose are a native snake, so you actually have to have that commercial permit and a native permit.
Okay.
So,
But yes, you can.
yes.
Okay.
So tomorrow's Christmas Eve. So I definitely have to thank everybody for being here with us, even on the holiday. And I don't know what's going on in your world right now, but I hope it's great. And if not, I love you and I hope things get better soon. And all of you guys, thank you for being here. I think you're amazing.
Thank you for
Yes.
having me on.
I know it was a shaky start, but thank you so much for having me.
No, you were awesome. And
Never again. Fucking.
So you guys hang around for the end after the end, but everybody else, thank you for watching. We appreciate it. And keep your ear to the ground for any of those laws that are coming around. And please, if you find one that hasn't been publicized, make people aware so we can find out about it. Thank
be
you all.
safe. Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody.